and welcome back to the Now We Know Show, the show where we discuss a topic of interest, and by the end, we will have learnt something new, and hopefully, you will too. I'm Zach.
I'm Buzz.
And I'm Jack.
And in this episode, we're taking a trip into the mysterious world of British folklore.
Ooh.
If you thought dragons, vampires and werewolves are things that you only see in blockbuster movies, or that hinky punks, grindylows, hobbits and barrow wights are things that you will find in books by J.K. Rowling or J.R.R. Tolkien, then you would be mistaken. For all these mythical creatures and countless others have been part of British folklore for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Therefore, we've decided that the Now We Know show will delve into these myths and legends and tell you all about the fascinating folklore that each shire across the UK has. We will each be choosing a tale to tell you about from a specific shire, and for this episode, Jack has chosen Hertfordshire.
Yes, our local, our
Pretty
area.
much. Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, we're right on the corner
Yeah.
of both Hertfordshire.
And Bedfordshire.
Well, we are in Bedfordshire, but right on the corner of Hertfordshire and Cambridgeshire almost, aren't we?
Yeah,
So we're right in that hotspot.
Yes. Shall we ask the computer what folklore actually is?
Definitely.
That would be a very good question. So, computer, what is folklore?
According to Wikipedia, folklore is the body of culture shared by a particular group of people. It encompasses the traditions common to that culture, subculture or group. This includes oral traditions such as tales, legends, proverbs and jokes.
And there we go. So, folklore.
Yes.
It's
More
some-
specifically,
Hertfordshire.
Hertfordshire folklore.
Hertfordshire folklore.
I can imagine there's quite a lot of tales out there, to be honest.
I was surprised actually, because I've never really looked into much kind of folklore around this area. Obviously, people know the famous ones of Britain and everything, but actually Hertfordshire, I've not looked into any specific stories or anything.
Is it a hotspot?
Possibly.
Well,
I found
I'd be
quite a
interested to see
few.
what your
I
stories
found
are.
quite a few.
well, maybe we should, for those more international listeners, kind of try and explain. Every country and culture has its different folklore, and what you suggested, Jack, that we look at the different shires. But
Yeah.
some people out there might not quite understand what we're talking about when we're talking about shires.
It's
so-
not a thing from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, well, okay, well, obviously Tolkien is English and wrote the Middle-earth stories and sagas all about the missing, mythical, forgotten history of
Lord of the Rings.
England. Of
Hobbit.
England, basically.
Yeah.
That's what it was based around. And he took lots of different things from both English folklore and European folklore, Vikings and things. And when we're talking about the shires, so like if you're living in the States, you'd live in a particular state, Pennsylvania, Virginia, wherever, and then they're broken up into counties.
Yeah.
I don't know if they call them shires in the States.
don't think so.
I don't think I've ever heard of
Obviously
American.
we're in Bedfordshire and then Hertfordshire, so and that's the name of our counties. And where do we get this word shire from? Well, when the Anglo-Saxons were in England, and then you had the Norman invasion, and the Normans took over, they went around separating the land,
Dividing it all up.
dividing it
Yeah.
all up into the shires that are pretty much what they are now. Each shire had a reeve that was put into place to manage that shire, and that shire, that reeve who governed over the shire is where you get the name Shire Reeve, which has become sheriff. So if you're in America and you've got your sheriff who
yeah.
obviously makes sure law and order is kept,
Well, there you go.
he's your Shire
We're
Reeve.
learning something already.
We're learning something already. So, and we've got these shires, and each shire in the UK is steeped
Yeah.
in so much rich mythical
Mm.
belief and stories that date back hundreds and thousands of years.
So, Hertfordshire.
That's where we're talking about
Folklore.
Yes, folklore.
Who's going first?
Well, Jack was the one who decided we're going to do Hertfordshire. So, what about you, Jack?
Yeah, I'll go
Kick it off.
first. So, are we all aware of the story of Robin Hood?
Yes,
Yeah.
I think so. I've seen several Robin Hood
Steal from the
movies.
rich, give to the poor.
Yep,
Yeah.
famous for stealing from the rich to give to the poor. Well, what if I told you that right here in Hertfordshire, we may have had our very own Robin Hood type figure known as Jack O'Legs?
Oh,
Jack O'Legs.
Jack O'Legs.
Jack O'Legs.
did he have long legs, perchance?
I've never heard of Jack O'Legs.
Right, well, legend has it that Jack O'Legs lived in a cave near Baldock in the village of Weston, and is said to be buried in the graveyard of the Holy Trinity Church, where 2 stones, 14 feet apart, mark the spots where his head and feet are supposed to be.
So this guy is meant to be 14 feet tall.
Allegedly, yeah.
So he's basically a giant of a man.
He's a giant of a man.
And probably where he gets the name Jack O'Legs from, because
Yes.
Because he's tall.
because he's tall.
He's a bit of Robin Hood type figure, which we'll get to.
Okay.
So, do you want to know the story of Jack O'Legs?
Yeah,
That's what we're here for.
So, Jack lived in a cave near the town of Baldock and the village of Weston in Hertfordshire. Jack was very tall, so tall in fact that he could talk to people through their upstairs windows.
Wow.
Which I read that and I was like, well, their houses probably weren't very
Well, quite as tall as they would be these
Yeah,
days.
because I've been to a house that's in the Doomsday Book, and they do have really low ceilings.
Yeah, he probably had quite a lot of
I
trouble
keep,
hitting his head on
if I go inside, I keep bumping my head on all the door frames because they're so short.
Did you need to step over to go through the doorways? Did they have a step?
A little bit.
Well, the reason I bring that up is because I've been to many old country houses, and a lot of the time in the doorways you had a step that you had to step over as well as having the low ceilings, and it's called the threshold. That's where you go across the threshold.
I think they had a lot of work done, so I don't think I had to.
Well, each room would have that step because you'd have straw and things on the floor.
There are a couple of steps around.
And that would keep the threshings in from kicking around, so it's called the threshold.
Oh.
So I just wondered, I'd ask. So interesting.
Learning new things by the minute.
So you carry your bride across the threshold into your home.
Going to a lot of detail.
Meanwhile, Jack O'Legs is looking through the window upstairs.
Wrongly or rightly. All was well until one year there was a pretty bad harvest and the bakers from Baldock cornered the local market in flour and put the prices up, which is something we can all sort of relate to today.
We have a bit of a food crisis at the moment. Well, that's what we're being told anyway.
So, thinking this to be somewhat unjust, Jack O'Legs would lay in wait for the bakers on what is now called Jack's Hill, between Weston and Gravely. He caught them, got the flour off them, and gave it to his friends in Weston, which is where he gets the legend of kind of stealing from the rich to give to the poor, kind of.
Kind of, yeah.
Flour.
Yes. This happened a few times, and understandably, the bakers weren't too happy about it. So one night, they waited for Jack to arrive and ambushed him in a surprise attack. They beat him severely, and some versions of this story suggest that they even took his eyes out.
Ooh.
There's a couple that I read that
Ow.
didn't say that they did, and then other ones I read that said that his eyes got gouged out.
Did they kill him?
Well,
We'll find out.
eventually they took him to Baldock to execute him. But before they did, they agreed to grant him a final request. Jack said, "Point me towards Weston, and where my arrow lands, I wish to be buried." So they gave him a bow and arrow, which no one else could pull because it was so big.
Giant bow.
Yeah, and he fired off his arrow into the sky towards Weston, and it landed 3 miles further on in Weston churchyard, with some accounts saying the arrow actually struck the steeple of the church before bouncing down into the soil. So that was his last request before he was executed.
Oh, nice.
I think that's a theme that's come up in different cultures around the world.
It's interesting.
You have a bow that nobody else can pull.
Yeah.
It's interesting you
Or
say
string,
about
a bow that can't be strung. That's it.
shooting an arrow and wherever it lands, get buried.
Yeah.
I think I may have come up with a similar thing
Okay.
in my story.
Oh, fair enough.
So it's a weird kind of
Listeners, we haven't confided on.
weird coincidence.
There was always the chance that we could come into the studio
Yeah.
and have chosen the same story.
Yeah. We pretty much only know the titles-ish of our stories. Other than that, we don't know anything.
Exactly.
Yeah, so after his execution, Jack was buried in the churchyard of the Holy Trinity Church in Weston, where you can still visit his grave today. And so I did. Recently I took a trip to the Holy Trinity Church in Weston and saw the grave for myself. So we're going to cut to me in the churchyard of the Holy Trinity Church.
Okay,
and
listening to
my
this.
reactions to the actual grave of Jack
Okay,
O'Legs.
let's have a listen.
So we are in the graveyard of Holy Trinity Church in Weston, and literally right by the entrance we have what appears to be, well, very clearly, is Jack O'Legs' grave. So literally a few steps in to the entrance of the churchyard, we have a wooden sign, probably about, 5 foot wide, with some nice engraved letters on saying Jack O'Legs' grave. And in my research for this episode and this folk tale, I did come across the legacy of Jack O'Legs' grave. 2 stones, supposed to be 14 feet apart, mark the head and foot of Jack's grave. Well, that is very clearly what there is here. 2 stones, probably about the size of a football each. I'm not entirely sure which one is the head and which one is the feet. I would assume the head is that one because it's slightly bigger, but I don't think it has any kind of defining marks or anything on it to suggest whether it's a head or a foot. Starting to lose light now, but from here there's actually a really nice kind of moonlight coming down and it looks quite sinister. So we've taken a little bit of a walk down the pathway. It's getting quite dark now, so we can't really see much in the distance, but it's a very lovely churchyard, I must say. The church behind us, towering over us, there's what appears to be a St George's flag on top, although I can't quite see what that is. There's a square Norman tower, which is really nice. Yes, very atmospheric at the moment. Very happy to see the supposed grave of Jack O'Legs. It's a lot more kind of prominent than I expected it to be. So yes, before we lose any more light, we're going to head back past the grave and see if we can see anything else. So it's starting to get quite dark now, so we're going to head back. We're going to walk past Jack O'Legs' grave again in just a moment. I must say, really nice graveyard, churchyard I should say. Yes, really happy I found the Jack O'Legs' grave. I'm really interested to find out more about the legend surrounding him and a bit more about the history of this area. Maybe if anyone is listening and they have any tales of Jack O'Legs or any more information, then that would be really, really cool to listen to. We're approaching it now on the way back. It's surprisingly close to the actual gates of the church as well. I was quite surprised. I thought we'd have to search for it more, but literally within a few steps of coming into the churchyard, it's literally right there. So obviously it's quite a bit of pride for possibly the people who live around here to have it displayed so close to the gates. Walking past one of the stones now. They are very small. I was expecting them to be slightly bigger just from what I was reading. The description is perfect though. They are 14 feet apart. As I say, the stones are about the size of a football maybe. A really nice wooden sign, about 5 feet across the centre of the two stones. So yes, Jack O'Legs' grave. Let's head back. So I looked into the kind of tradition of Jack O'Legs around the area to see if there was anything that kind of still prevails today. So a sign on the village green tells the story, and a picture of Jack O'Legs is part of the village shield. All around the area there are references to him in titles such as Jack's Cave and Jack's Hill. And I've actually got a picture of the village sign right here, which I'll show you. Here's the Western Shield.
Oh yeah.
Oh yes.
So you can see the Holy Trinity Church here.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have Jack.
Basically pointing his bow and arrow in the direction of the church.
Very simplified version, but it's an account.
It depicts it.
Yes. We also have a mural in a local school, which shows Jack O'Legs with the bread. And we can see some angry
bakers. It's the socks they're wearing.
Oh,
almost looks like a Mr. Ben cartoon, though, doesn't it?
Yeah, he looks quite like, if I may say, like the Jolly Green Giant there.
Yeah.
Doesn't he?
Yeah, well, there's a slight connection, which we'll get to. So I found a BBC article about Jack O'Legs and the kind of story behind him. And it had an interesting interview with a man named Brendan King, who is the chairman of the local history society based at the Baldock Museum. So he said, anything connected with him has been passed down through oral traditions. The earliest known reference to the story is from a poem by John Skelton in about 1521 called Speak Parrot.
Speak Parrot.
Which is a diatribe against Cardinal Wolsey. In it he says, he has a line saying, the gibbet of Baldock was made for Jack Leg.
Right.
Which I guess kind of...
The gibbet, which is what you hang something for a gibbet.
He expected his audience, who were the people at court, really to know about the legend, so he must assume that the legend was quite old even at the time. So it's probably...
A small reference like that, yeah.
before that. So it must have been a medieval legend, because Baldock didn't actually exist until 1148 or thereabouts.
Mm-hmm.
So the story originated sometime between 1148 and 1521. So we don't quite know, but that's a good estimation. Although Brendan explained that it was more likely to be the early part of the period than the later, because of certain elements in the story. So kind of, again, it's a guess, but it's around that sort of time.
Well, you get that kind of variation because with King Arthur, you get the much older, more ancient story of King Arthur, and then you have the more modernised one with the full plate armour, which would never have happened.
Yeah.
The late medieval period, but it goes back a lot further than that.
It's when they talk about oral tradition, it's a similar thing, isn't it? It's kind of gets passed down, and changed various.
As I've mentioned before, I'm a great fan of Beowulf. And Beowulf is the oldest existing written in Anglo-Saxon poem, and that talks about obviously Beowulf, the hero, and demons, and not going into talking about Beowulf, but that was passed down with oral tradition. And the reflection on that is you've got this Anglo-Saxon, probably a priest or a monk, because they would need to have been skilled in writing to actually write it down. But prior to that, it would have been, even though it's the oldest written one, it would have gone way back beyond that and passed down by oral tradition until that particular individual decided, let's write it down. So it's fascinating.
Yeah.
Jack O'Legs.
So the capture and execution of the giant Jack O'Legs suggests a period when it was possible for the local lord to execute people caught red-handed, which we know now in this country isn't a thing you can do.
No, you can't do that.
A rite known as Infangen thief. Yeah, that's what it's known as, but I don't know.
I've not heard of that.
I haven't heard of it either.
If you've heard of that, listeners,
please comment below.
Please comment below. Tell us about it.
Infangen thief.
That sounds rather Anglo-Saxon, even Viking, perhaps.
So this kind of explains it as the whole story of Jack O'Legs suggests that he was subject to something like illegal lynching. So it's like, I assume that's what that kind of...
Well, that reflects the gibbet.
Yeah. But nobody is really sure to this day, because obviously it's still a mythology, it's still a legend.
Well, what's really nice is that here we are in the 21st century,
and we still know.
You've still got this, and we're passing it on now.
Yeah,
you're passing it on. And
I didn't know about this at all until I started researching. So it's brought a new story to my attention that I didn't know about. That's literally right on my doorstep.
Fantastic. The story and legend of Jack O'Legs.
Yes.
A funny thing, didn't we find a beer or cider or something that was called Jack O'Legs?
Yeah, Tring Brewery, I believe, did an ale which was called Jack O'Legs, which was based on the legend of Jack O'Legs, but it's discontinued, so you can't buy it anymore.
Oh no, that would have been good for one of our podcasts.
Yeah.
Didn't we have a weird encounter when we went to go and find this place for Jack O'Legs?
Well, you guys were out there because Jack was obviously recording it, what we listened to, and you were sound man.
Well, on our way there, we were going through some dark country lanes, and it was completely dark. All we had was the car. And then, as soon as we rounded a corner, suddenly, hundreds of lights just suddenly appeared.
Yes,
Do you
it was
remember?
like a scene out of Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Really?
Yeah. And it was just such a bizarre occurrence. It was like, oh no, have we suddenly been attacked by aliens?
In the sky? Or?
No, they were on the road in front of us. They just suddenly appeared.
Oh, how strange.
They were like floating
lights.
Floating lights.
These big lights, Or...
Were they 14-foot tall lights?
We were there. It was like kind of... Well, it turned out it was cyclists.
Oh, cyclists.
It turned out it was cyclists, but it was like a weird, suddenly, moment on our adventure.
Well, there you go. That would drop into one of our future podcasts about unidentified.
Oh yes.
That'd be good.
UFOs
or UAPs as they're known now. But then you identified them. Unidentified no longer. So that's the
identified
story.
Floating objects.
Yeah. So that was the story. Any more on Jack O'Legs?
Yes. So I looked into a bit of the kind of speculation as to where this would have originated from, because obviously all these stories would have had to have come from somewhere. And I found various different explanations as to what the actual origin of the story is. The first theory is from the BBC article. It seems likely then that from all the references to him that are still in the area and from things that happened in the story, The legend of Jack O'Legs possibly originated from the existence of a tall robber who stole from the rich to give to the poor and got caught red-handed and executed. So basically, he wasn't a giant, he was just a very tall person.
Longshanks.
Yeah.
But where did the bakers come into it? Very angry bakers.
But because he was good to the less fortunate, he became like a local hero and was talked about from generation to generation, each time becoming taller, braver, and even more heroic with a bigger bow and arrow. So that's interesting because over time we would have kind of the more the story gets passed
You
down,
embellish it.
Became
Yes.
more of a hero.
so it's like Robin Hood became like a superhero almost.
So prolific
Yeah.
nowadays.
But whatever the facts of the situation might be, it's likely that Jack O'Legs was known far and wide, and maybe one day we'll find out the truth. But at the moment, it's all just pure speculation. The second explanation and final explanation that I found was that Jack has many similarities to Jack in the Green or the Green Man.
Which goes back to that
Picture.
mural you
Picture,
showed
yes,
us.
but he's got kind of almost like leaves in his hair.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
looked almost like,
It
and
looked
he
like-
was very.
like the
brown.
Jolly
Very
Roger.
Yeah.
reminiscent of it, wasn't
Just
it?
when you said that, I was like, well, it's kind of one
Yeah.
of the theories, yeah. So the Green Man is a popular figure from English folklore derived from pre-Christian fertility cults. He preferred living in caves and woodland and had a disregard for authority, which is what Jack O'Legs was. There are also similarities to the Woses or Wildmen carved inside many English churches, but unusually, in this instance, Jack is the hero rather than a sidekick, similar to Little John. The representation of the Bakers of Baldock may be a satire on the Knights Templar who founded the town. This monastic order would have been able to dictate bread prices because they owned the banks, the surrounding farmland, the flour mills and the marketplace. They also had the power to punish thieves and outlaws.
Yeah, well, definitely when you're talking about the Knights Templar, they were a huge organisation at the time, and they would have had all the tithe barns, which would have been full with all the grain. They would have controlled everything, so you're quite right.
Yeah.
So he was fighting back against the man.
Yeah. The big they.
the,
that we
big
talk
day, the big day of the time.
So yes, that's a kind of brief kind of explanation of
Jack
Jack
O'Legs.
O'Legs, fantastic tale.
Yes, I was very interested. Again, I'd never heard of this story at all before. Visiting the grave was amazing because obviously it kind of brought the whole mythology to life almost.
Yeah.
And yeah, listening to some of the speculation.
Interesting to say, because I mean, Jack O'Legs from where he's buried is very much on the corner of Bedfordshire as well. So I wonder if any of that tradition kind of spilt over into Bedfordshire at all. You know, he's so close to the
Yeah,
border.
possibly. Yeah.
Very interesting. If there were any tales
Yeah.
from this side of the county
Yeah.
line. But anyway, interesting. So now we've heard about Jack O'Legs. Are we going over to Zach?
Yes, we're going to move on to what I have to say. Okay, so we've heard about Jack O'Legs. Now it's time to hear about Sir Piers Shonks.
Sir Piers Shonks.
Shonks.
There is a name.
That's such a cool name.
Piers Shonks.
Piers Shonks.
Sounds
Okay.
a bit French. Piers Shonks.
Piers. Yeah.
Piers Shonks.
Okay. Sir Piers Shonks was a legendary figure in the village of Brent Pelham in Hertfordshire, England, whose tomb is within the north wall of the village's church. According to local legend, Shonks slew a dragon that was causing havoc in the district and later cheated the devil from claiming his soul by being buried within the walls of the church.
Ooh,
Oh, I didn't know we had dragons in the area.
not anymore.
Not
'cause
anymore, because
No.
of Piers.
He's done more than we could when we did our adventure game. Anyway.
He actually managed to find
Yeah,
the
yeah,
dragon.
that's kind of one of the reasons I picked this one, because I wanted to bring a dragon
Yeah.
into the Now We
Make up
Know
for the
show.
dragon content.
So this is a dragon in Hertfordshire.
Yes,
It was until
It was.
it was until it was killed by
Mr. Shonks.
Mr. Shonks, or Sir Shonks.
Is it Sir? It's
Sir
Sir
Piers
Shonks.
Shonks.
So he was a knight,
Yes.
as all good dragon slayers need to be knights, don't
Yeah.
they?
Was St George Roman, wasn't he?
Yeah, that didn't even occur in England.
Well, yeah, but again, that's all about symbolism.
Yeah.
Yeah, people always want to bulk against things. They'll say, "Oh, he was from Turkey," and it's like, yes, but it's the symbolism that counts, not the where he's from or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's like having St Patrick of Ireland, and he was Welsh.
Yeah.
You know, he went across to Ireland and supposedly drove all the snakes out. He wasn't Irish.
Okay, are we ready?
Come on.
The legend. Legend has it Sir Piers Shonks was a local lord of the manor. The earthworks of his moated manor house can still be seen to the east of Brent Pelham, known locally as Shonks.
Oh, okay.
So the
we can
moated remains are just known as Shonks.
Shonks.
tell where they got the name from.
E-S. Shonks.
Shonks. Okay.
According to the legend, Shonks returned from a holiday to discover that a fearsome dragon had moved into Brent Pelham
We've all been there.
Yeah.
and was wreaking havoc on the district. With all the local crops burnt and ruined, the dragon was said to have created its lair in the cave under the roots of a great and ancient yew tree that once stood on the boundary of two fields, known as Great Pepsils and Little Pepsils Fields. The dragon was said to be the favourite of the devil himself.
So he's like the dragon was kind of like a devil's minion type thing.
Yes.
That's quite
Interesting, because this is the second mention of a cave,
Yeah,
and you kind of don't really associate Hertfordshire.
it's like when they're coming up with the
caves.
myths over time. It's like where should they live?
Stick with the
Cave.
cave.
A cave could be anywhere.
Okay. Determined to rid the district of the dragon, Shonks set off to hunt the beast, dressed in full armour with a sword and spear or lance. Shonks was said to be accompanied by an attendant and 3 favourite hounds. All were said to be so swift it was thought they had wings. After a lengthy hunt, Shonks located the dragon in its lair. A ferocious struggle ensued, and eventually, whilst the hounds snapped at the dragon's legs, Shonks managed to kill the monster by thrusting his spear down its throat.
So it's
That's what they
kind
call
of,
it.
it's kind of a local St George and the Dragon.
Yeah.
Yeah, very
you
much.
got
Yeah,
there.
but
Because if you've seen St George and the Dragon, a lot of the time it's depicted as him sticking his lance up into the
yeah,
dragon's mouth.
because that's the thing. I never heard of this until I looked it up.
Yep.
And it just so happens it's in this area. And
Yeah.
I'd never heard of it
It's
before.
a similar thing with me and Jack O'legs. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Out of interest, what sort of years, what kind of era was this?
I'm going to get to that.
Okay.
Okay.
After slaying the dragon, Shonks was said to be puzzled by the thick smell of sulphur in the air. And turning around, he found the devil standing behind him.
Ooh, you don't want that.
Round 2.
Yeah, so you've just defeated the first monster. Now we've got the level boss.
Yeah.
The devil was said to be so enraged by the killing of his creature that he vowed to take revenge upon Shonks, saying that he would claim Shonks' body and soul upon Shonks' death. And further, Shonks could not evade this fate by being buried either inside or outside the Brent Pelham church. Shonks was said to be unmoved by the devil's threats and retorted that his soul belonged to God and his body would rest wherever he chose. Most versions of the story state Shonks lived for many years after slaying the dragon. Although writing in 1700, the local historian Henry Chauncey wrote Shonks was mortally wounded whilst battling with the dragon and died soon afterwards. There's a bit of confliction there.
So do you think that was just him embellishing the story a bit?
Possibly. Possibly.
So although this is the 1700s, you say?
Yeah.
But that's when it's being recounted by this writer.
Mm.
So obviously this is a tale that's much earlier than that.
Medieval.
Yeah.
But the point that he's meant to be wearing full armour
Yeah.
would put him into the kind of late medieval period with the plate armour.
Yeah.
Yeah, so. But then again, you get that kind of with stories, as I already said, with King Arthur.
Yeah.
So it could be a much earlier story.
Possibly.
And then they've sort of brought it up to date with putting him in plate armour.
Yeah.
Legend has it, as Shonks lay dying, he asked for a bow and an arrow. Shooting the arrow into the air, he stated that he should be buried wherever the arrow landed.
Okay.
The arrow flew.
It's a multiverse.
It's a multiverse, definitely. Is this like DC and Marvel?
The arrow flew through an open window in the Brent Pelham church and lodged in the church's north wall, and so it was decided that upon his death, Shonks would be buried within the wall of the church. As he was buried inside the wall of the church, which was neither inside nor outside the church, Shonks' soul was said to be beyond the devil's grasp, and so the devil was denied his revenge. A less commonly told version of the legend is Piers Shonks was a giant who bested a rival in Barkway.
Oh, interesting.
How interesting. You've got these little parallels.
And it's
there.
well, obviously it's the same area, so
Yeah.
I wonder if it could have been like a branching.
Well, I
Tale.
mentioned that earlier, whether it came across county lines, but obviously they're both in Hertfordshire.
Yeah,
But you've got that same, I'm going to draw my bow.
out the window.
Put together like an Avengers team of all of our folklore characters.
And a fun fact
Yeah, I
about
was going to say, is your one like, Hawkeye? And this one's like, what's the other one? The Green
Well, mine's
Green Arrow.
Arrow.
like
That's it.
Hulk as well.
It's interesting because
Yeah,
the only other instance I know of that this type of thing happening with an arrow being shot out of a window was actually from a Robin Hood movie
Yes, because that's
Yeah.
part of the Robin Hood
called
tale, isn't it?
Robin and Marion.
That's more Nottingham, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah.
So
So
weird.
Yeah, that's
And
kind of
then
bizarre.
tails.
Interesting parallels.
Yeah, tails would. I mean, you got drovers. Drover, if you don't know what drover is, a drover is somebody that basically moves animals from place to place, just like if you're in America and you got the cowboys moving herds of cattle. A drover would drove geese and sheep and goats and cattle and whatever around the place, and stories would probably be taken from town to town through people like drovers, because they're the ones travelling around. A lot of people back in the day really didn't travel outside their local areas, and probably absolutely loved to hear stories from somebody coming from another part of the countryside.
It's a whole new catalogue of stories.
Yeah. So
I wonder if it's like nowadays when you get like a reboot of a film franchise. I used to think of a reboot of Jack O'Legs. Just add a dragon.
No, stick a dragon in there. Yes, yeah.
There could be some truth to that though, because you tell a story enough times, and you think maybe I could add something.
It's like Chinese whispers, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I could add something like a dragon or something to get this a bit more exciting to tell my kids.
Dragons are a favourite in the UK. There's dragons all over the place. Wales, down in the West Country, Uffington, with the Dragon Hill down there.
What's the actual kind of origin of a dragon? Where do you reckon it came from?
Well, I mean, where's that? There's one up north, which is Lambton. The Lambton worm was a favourite. I remember hearing about finding out about the Lambton worm when I was in primary school. So that would have been way back in the early 70s. I don't know if you heard of the Lambton worm. So I'm kind of going off.
I just remember the primeval episode of the Lambton worm.
Yeah, going off tangent a little bit, but that fascinated me. And it was about this local worm, which is another word for a type of dragon. Maybe we should talk about that in a second. They kept wrapping itself around Lambton Hill and terrorising the local countryside and probably eating sheep and who knows what. And then that was a local knight that came to defeat the worm, and he put his armour on. And in that particular one, in order to defeat the worm, he had all his armour had spikes put on. So it was covered in spikes. So when it wrapped around to crush him,
pierced it.
It killed itself by trying to crush him. And as a kid, I was like, wow, this is amazing. But then, but that was a worm, or I think that's pronounced sometimes worm or worm.
WYRM.
But as far as I'm aware, and
sounds a bit Welsh.
Listeners, you can put these in the comments about dragons, because we love dragons. Everybody loves dragons.
The Dragon Podcast.
Yeah, we have to do a dragon podcast. But with dragons, I think you got like a worm is a dragon that doesn't have legs.
Kind of like a snake, a large snake.
Yeah, like that. And then you've got a dragon which has 4 legs and wings. Always wings, but they can have dragons without wings.
Yeah, you can have dragons.
But it's on 4 legs. And then you have a wyvern.
Yeah.
Which has 2 legs, but 2 wings, but it's kind of got a bit like a pterodactyl. It's got little claws in its wings.
That's the one we usually see in films.
Yeah, it's a wyvern.
That's how usually in films
how
dragons are depicted nowadays.
Yeah, it's because it's one of those annoying things down on Holby City when it used to be Holby City. It's finished now. It's not anymore recorded. But when we
bingo card.
But when I was working down on, didn't you guys worked on Holby, didn't you?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, we all worked on Holby, and they had the Wyvern Ward.
Okay.
Do you remember that? Wyvern Ward. And they had this big glass panel over the doors of Wyvern Ward, which said Wyvern Ward, funny enough. And it had this, it was all etched. It was like engraved glass panel, which had a dragon on it.
Oh, okay.
4 legs and 2 wings.
But it's like, a wyvern.
It's not a wyvern. That's a dragon. Who could get that so wrong?
Would you like a fun fact about the Hobbit movies and Smaug?
Yeah, go on.
Sure.
Okay. So, if you watch the beginning of the first Hobbit movie, An Unexpected Journey, when Smaug first appears, you only see little fleeting glimpses.
Yeah, you do, when he's going into
Erebor.
Erebor, smashing in.
As he breaks in, he has front legs.
Does he?
Yeah. It wouldn't make sense if it was his back legs, like reaching around the door and grabbing on to the inside of the door.
And breaking through. He wouldn't do
that
with his
and then he
back
stomps through Erebor.
Yep.
You just see his front feet walking through. But then,
I was going to say, because
after that, in the second movie and the third movie,
Smaug,
he's a wyvern.
He's wyvern. He hasn't got any front legs.
He hasn't got any front legs. It's just a really weird thing to notice.
Well, Peter Jackson, if you're listening to this podcast, come in and explain.
Please, can you explain that one?
Because if you think of it as a 2-legged dragon, as you see that, doesn't really make any sense.
Yeah, we can get
because
his wings
his
round
entire body would be in front of that.
Yeah.
in front of his legs. Yeah.
Yeah.
He'd be like leaning backwards.
Yeah, just like sitting on his tail and using his back legs to
Yeah,
paddle.
yeah, it's really weird.
Oh, interesting. Huh?
Yeah,
Yeah,
little,
yeah.
little,
Anyway,
little side tangent on
Yeah.
there. We got a bonus story in there with the Lambton worm
The lantern worm, yes.
and a bit of facts about the Hobbit.
Yeah.
Okay, who
Right,
wants to
come on.
learn about where Sir Piers Shonks was buried?
We do!
Well, it sounds like he's buried in a wall.
Buried
He's
in
buried in a wall.
That's an
Okay.
interesting.
That's a very
So-
interesting fact.
The tomb. Piers Shonks' tomb, which is believed to date from between the 11th and 13th centuries, can be seen inside St Mary's Church in Brent Pelham. It is set within a deep recess within the northern wall of the church's nave. The tomb has an elaborately carved, heavily restored marble cover that can be dated stylistically to the 13th century. It depicts 4 evangelists, an angel carrying a soul away to heaven, and a large foliated cross, the foot of which is thrust through the mouth of a 2-legged dragon.
Ah, I was
I've
going
seen
to ask if there was a dragon in there depicted in it.
The tomb itself bears no inscription, but above it is a tablet believed to have been added by the church's vicar in the 17th century. It is inscribed in Latin and English. The English part reads, O Piers Shonks, who died anno 1086. Nothing of Cadmus or St. George, those names of great renown, survives them but their fames. Time was so sharp set as to make no bones of theirs, nor their monumental stones. But Shonks one serpent kills, to other defies, and in this wall, as in a fortress, lies.
Ah, now that's interesting. Very interesting. Did you manage to get over to see the tomb?
Unfortunately, I didn't.
Oh, we
Well,
have to
that's
make a
good.
trip.
That needs a trip.
Yeah,
You know.
especially inside. Have a look.
Interesting when we talk about where these characters were kind of buried. We've got Jack O'Legs and his supposed grave, and we've got
Mhm.
Piers and his grave. What's actually in those graves if these characters aren't what they say they are? If you know what I mean. If this,
Yeah, I mean,
because obviously he's not a
you know what
giant as far
time
as I'm aware.
team to come and excavate
Yeah, because obviously
Jack O'Legs.
someone's going to have to have written that as a story on the
Yeah,
in Latin, in
Yeah.
English, and something's buried there. So what actually is it?
yeah. Well,
Or
I'm not sure whether they're going to allow us to break through the wall of the church.
I'm just intrigued to know where this, because obviously that's the closest thing to evidence that we have that these things are real. So why could we assume that they aren't?
Well, unless, I mean, obviously with the legend of Jack O'Legs, and obviously you visited the grave. Yeah, I mean, somebody at some point could put 2 rocks in a churchyard and say, "Oh,
There you go.
that must be Jack O'Legs' grave."
I can kind of see that one, but with that when it's
That
kind
one,
of
no,
marble and everything.
You see, that's intriguing because did you say was it a marble cover or something you described? It would put on at a later date.
The tomb has an elaborately carved, heavily restored marble cover that can be dated stylistically to the 13th
Oh, so
century.
that goes back to the 12th.
But the inscription
is added later.
was added later in the
The
17th.
century. So that obviously somebody was
Yeah,
putting inside the wall.
I'm just intrigued to know where these things popped up. If there's got to be some truth if these things exist.
See, that is the thing that intrigues me. Is the idea of a dragon. Because there was something else that popped out in your story when you were recollecting it, and that is it was burning the crops.
Yeah,
So it's not just you've got a case of a beast of some sort.
it was
that's
actually
going
doing
around
some damage.
that's attacking animals or whatever, but supposedly that you've now got added in that there's fire, flames. It's a fire-breathing dragon. Yeah, it's there. It's a fire-breathing dragon. Fascinating. Absolutely. I don't know. I mean, you know, we dismiss dragons quite easily, and I said we probably should do a podcast solely on dragons, but I've always considered that the legend of dragons probably stems from the discovery of
Dinosaur bones, yeah.
or fossils, should I say? Because people would have seen those if you got a landslide and like in the Jurassic coast down on the south coast of Britain, and you have
How
a
else would
landslide,
you explain
and
it?
you see this big what looks like a skeleton, not realizing that it's fossilized bones, and you see the teeth and everything else. You're going to think that creature, that's a skeleton of a creature that must still live. You know?
Yeah, goodness.
And we spoke a little while ago about different depictions of animals over different countries. Obviously, there wouldn't have been photographs of animals, so people would have had to draw their depictions from descriptions of
I
animals.
remember you mentioned about that.
So something like that could have maybe turned into a mythical beast of some kind, because it doesn't look like how we.
I believe
the
original 3 lions on the English, the King's Standard, the 3 lions.
Yeah.
The original depictions look more like kind of skinny leopards,
Yeah.
because they didn't really know what a lion looked like.
Yeah.
Described to whoever designed it. But yeah, fascinating.
Okay, would we like to learn about the rise of the legend?
Yes, even more. I think
Okay.
you guys are outdoing me on my one.
Okay. It is believed the tomb in Brent Pelham Church may have given rise to the legend of Sir Piers Shonks slaying a dragon and cheating the devil. The tomb's depiction of a dragon with a cross thrust through its mouth could have inspired the story of slaying a dragon and given the detail of how the dragon was dispatched. The inclusion of an angel carrying a soul to heaven may have inspired the story of the devil claiming Shonks' soul, whilst its unusual location within the walls of the church could have initiated the story of cheating the devil. The 4 evangelists depicted on the tomb as 1 winged man and 3 winged beasts may have given rise to the tradition of a winged attendant and winged hounds.
That we said earlier about him having his.
His hounds were so fast they were set to fly.
I wonder if he was actually just like a very rich, eccentric guy who had he made up his own kind of legend, and then because do you know what I mean by if it's a tomb, there's clearly someone in there.
Yeah, somebody has been, for some reason, and I would say this is unusual, has been entombed in a wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That in itself is kind of
very unique.
If you say to me that you're putting somebody into a wall, normally that would it would make me think they're being entombed alive. I think you get those tales where people have been bricked up into walls alive.
Yeah.
To put somebody, I mean, what do you do? Just stand the body, to wrap it up, stand it up.
Just someone has to hold
it up
him
while they I mean, wherever it comes from, who if it is this Piers Shonks that's in the wall of the church, it's just really unusual. What made the people there that actually put that deceased person in the wall?
Yeah.
We're going to put him in the wall.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Somebody's there. There is a tomb. There obviously is a tomb there. Absolutely fascinating to think about what happened on the day that
yeah
was done.
That's what I mean by someone's in there who's got a story. Whether or not it's this story is a different.
Yeah, but
thing
what was
altogether.
the story to take
Exactly.
an individual and say, well, we're not going to put them in the graveyard, and we're not going to put them in the church. A lot of people are laid to rest if they're very important within the church, but this is going to be in the wall.
Yeah.
How fascinating.
It is recorded that a family named Shank did possess property in the Brent Pelham parish in the 14th century, including the manor house Shonks, and that one member of the family, Peter Shank, was granted another manor house in the Barkway parish by the Earl of Arundel. It has been speculated that this Peter Shank may have been the Piers Shonks of the legend. It is unknown where the tradition of Shonks' death inscribed on the tomb as the year 1086 came from, potentially from an earlier lost account.
Again, it could just be an oral tradition, or somebody, a local vicar or whomever had the money to even make that inscription and to put it there, embellishing the story again, making it earlier in the scene.
He must have been, whoever's in that tomb must have been a very rich, well-respected person to get that sort of burial, because they couldn't have just been like a peasant.
Yeah, but like you said, Jack, you said eccentric. It's an eccentric thing to put somebody in the wall. You think if they were well-respected and influential and rich person, that they'd want a lavish tomb in the normal way. So there's kind of a weird twist to it, that whoever it was...
We're definitely going to have to go and figure it out.
We're going to have to take a visit over there.
The yew tree that was said to be the dragon's lair was mentioned in a tithe audit compiled between 1895 and 1900.
Oh, now that's interesting.
Which stated the tree was felled around 1820 and the root hole beneath the tree had been used as a stile on a footpath between Great Pepsall and Little Pepsall Fields. It has been speculated from the depictions of the tree that it may have been as much as 1,000 years old at the time it was cut down. and from its location it may have been an Anglo-Saxon boundary tree or possibly have been used to mark an early cemetery.
Well, yew trees are renowned for being put into cemeteries. If you go to most churchyards, most churches have yew trees associated with the churchyard. Other things use trees. That's what they used to make bows out of. Best type of longbow would be made out of yew. Interesting you mentioned, what did you call it? The root cavity or something you call it?
Let me just have a look. The root hole.
The root hole. So in the legend it was referred to as a cave, but now it's being described as a root hole.
And it's now been turned into a style for a footpath.
That would be what where the tree stump is to be a style. All right.
We'll have to go take a visit to that.
Yeah, if it's still around. Yeah, but it's just interesting because you say the root hole and it's referred to as that's where the dragon's cave. The cave. We lived in a cave below a tree, and then Jack O'Legs lived in a cave.
Jack's Hill. Yeah.
Would the term immediately your mind goes to a cave, or is just the term cave?
Just a shelter.
Just a shelter that's dug into the ground,
a
or
natural
something.
shelter.
Yeah, natural shelter, a divot in the ground or something. Yeah, absolutely fascinating.
There you go. That's all I have on Piers Shonks.
That
Piers
raised a lot.
Shonks,
That raised
the
a lot of
Dragon
questions.
Slayer.
We're putting together our Avengers team of legendary characters now.
Well, I don't know if my tale is going to come up to scratch on this one.
Well, let's have a look.
Right, so that just leaves it to me. Now, obviously, we wanted to have myths and legends and folklore of Hertfordshire. And you guys, unbeknownst to me, seem to have gone for two heroes which you've found the graves. You know where the grave is. You've actually been to a grave.
Yep.
So these people or characters were flesh and blood.
Yes, allegedly.
Allegedly. Whereas mine, I decided I'd go for a bit more of a supernatural route on it. I wanted to go for a supernatural hint. So what I did was I thought I would look up what come to around the area of Hertfordshire. You've got places like the Wicked Lady pub, which is named after a female highway lady that was there, if you want to call her highwayman, but she dressed as a man and used to rob people. And down at
bonus story.
Bonus story. Hemel Hempstead, you had Snooks, who was a highwayman, who I have visited his grave because they weren't allowed to bury them on church. What's it called? Consecrated ground. So he's buried out near a place called Boxmoor. Okay, and there's a little gravestone there for Snooks, who's a highwayman. So I was thinking, highwayman, what do we associate with highwayman when it comes to supernatural? Headless horseman.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I thought, right, well, okay, let's see if Hertfordshire has got any headless horsemen. So I was having a good look for headless horsemen.
Yeah.
And then one story popped out right at me, and it's all about a headless horse.
Okay, so the
Right.
actual horse itself is
The
headless.
horse is headless, which is absolutely
Does
fantastic.
the Italian mafia have anything to do with it?
I have no idea. Although that was a brown one, I think that was in his bed, and this one's a white one. Okay, and so it's the legend of the headless
Horse.
So White Horse Lane, it takes its name from the fact of the sightings of this headless horse. White Horse Lane is said to be haunted by the ghost of a headless horse. White Horse Lane sits more or less on the boundary between the Danelaw and the Saxons. And one story is that the haunting dates back to the battle which took place between the Saxons and the Vikings around 1002, when a white horse was beheaded in battle and haunts the lane to this day.
Ooh.
So we've got another one that, through oral tradition, there's a possibility it goes back to the time of the Danelaw, where the Vikings, if you don't know where the Danelaw is, the Danelaw sort of cut England in half at a jaunty angle.
Right.
So you had your Anglo-Saxons down at the bottom, Wessex, etc., and then the Danelaw, and the centre of rule up there was York, with the Vikings. So they're always having a go at each other.
Yeah. It's interesting there's some actual historical context to this one as well, being the battle is where the horse was thought to have originated from.
Originally. So that's where the earliest reference that I've had is that it's actually horse which was beheaded in that battle. There have been many claimed sightings of the headless horse in White Horse Lane, and many people found it to be intimidating and frightening to go down the road, and especially to navigate the lane at night.
I can imagine.
And when the horse was the main form of transport, it was said that horses would not walk the lane at night, although it's fair to say cars don't seem to have the same problem nowadays. And I know that because I decided to take a trip down there just to see if I could find any more about this headless white horse.
Or perhaps see the headless horse.
Perhaps see it. So I took a trip down to Burnham Green, where it is, and let's listen to my little trip out. So it's Buzz here. I've come to the location of White Horse Lane. This is the notorious lane where our headless horse is meant to gallop through this lane, and its decapitated body scares off the locals to such a point that legend has it that local animals, etc., won't go down the lane at all. It's quite spooky, to be fair. I mean, I'm standing here. It's quite a covered lane. It gets quite small and tight. I'll probably take a walk down and see how far it goes round, but it gets it's overgrown. The trees come over the top of the lane. It is a spooky little lane. What we're going to do now is I'm going to go off to the pub, and we're going to take a look at the pub sign, which is interesting. So follow me, and we'll go there now. Right, we've now arrived right outside the White Horse of Burnham Green. It's a very old pub. I believe it opened at the beginning of the 1800s, and I looked for pictures of the White Horse pub online prior to coming to the actual location, and I found a picture of the pub probably dated about 2006, which had a really intriguing pub sign outside, and the pub sign showed a white horse with a rider, but the horse had been decapitated, and this is going to sound gruesome, but there was blood spurting out of the neck of the horse, and it kind of reminded me of the slaughtered lamb from American Werewolf in London. So I mean, it's a really cool pub sign, and I was really looking forward to seeing this, and we've come down, and it would seem that over the years since 2006 the sign has changed. It's now a white horse's head, and that's it. So the white horse now actually has a head when it comes to the pub itself. So now we're going to go into the pub, and I'm going to see if anybody has any tales to tell of the headless spectral horse of Burnham Green. Hiya. Strange request maybe. I sent a message but didn't get a reply. I'm one of the presenters on the Now We Know Show podcast, which goes across Spotify, iPlay and everything, and we're doing a podcast on Hertfordshire Folklore, and this pub came up because of the pub's named after what was a spectral decapitated horse
down the lane, yeah.
And so we dropped in this evening completely off chance. I wondered if you or anybody, if you've got any locals in, have got any tales of actually seeing this spectral horse.
I haven't. I've only been.
But you've heard about it.
I've heard about it. Some of the regulars have come in, or people that live nearby.
Do you think there's anybody in the pub at the moment that might have anything to say on the subject?
Not at the minute, no. I don't think so. I know one of our regulars does have a story about it.
Have you never been told anything about it?
He made me Google it. But
I know. Well, there was one other thing I noticed. While doing the research on the White Horse pub, I found a photograph that I think was dated around 2006, which showed the pub sign outside had a decapitated horse on it with blood spurting out of his neck, which obviously the pub sign doesn't match that anymore. It was quite a gruesome pub sign, to be honest. So I was going to ask, well, obviously you say you don't know anything about it. I wondered what happened to that old pub sign.
I don't know. When did you send the email?
It was Messenger. I found you on Facebook and messaged. So it was a couple of days ago. because I knew I was going to be passing it soon. So you don't reckon recognise any locals in the pub?
They're not. They're new people, I think.
No
Yeah.
problem at all. Well, thank you very much for your time.
You're very welcome.
And
Maybe if you pop in another day when it's busier, like a Friday evening,
Okay,
maybe
okay.
someone might have something.
somebody might be able to tell us a story. Okay, thank you very much.
No problem.
So I'm sitting back in my car. I've been into the pub, spoke to a very lovely barmaid who had heard of tales of the spectral headless horse of White Horse Lane, but she hadn't actually heard any tales herself that she could tell us about, although she was aware of the story. It's a very quiet night in the pub, so there was no locals in. I asked if there were locals, and at the moment we've got no eyewitness reports on the headless spectral horse of Burnham Green. So next I'm going to take a drive down the dreaded lane and see if we see or sense anything. Okay, so now I'm just leaving the car park of the White Horse pub, which is right on the corner of the famous White Horse Lane. The sun's going down, it's getting a little bit darker now anyway. I'm just turning into the lane, and as well, I can see, I've taken a photograph of the lane. The lane itself is now starting to really become enclosed. It's about the width of the car itself, and all the bushes and trees are overhanging the lane. So yeah, I can see at night this is going to be quite an isolated spot coming down here. Slowly tracking down the lane now. It's very tight. No signs of a spectral headless horse yet. So what have we got? It's difficult to, there's a couple of bays to allow for other cars, or perhaps the headless horse, so you can pass in case you meet them on the way opposite direction coming down the lane. Open fields now, but still we have a very tight lane coming down here. So perhaps the headless horse comes charging down the lane and into the fields, maybe on a dark night. Still very tight. So it's a lovely little English country lane. It's twists and turns, just slowly coming down here, nice and gently. I'll say it's getting dark now. There's a footpath across to the left, and still the lane twists and turns onwards with some very heavy woodland. I could see why somebody, if they had to walk down this lane in the dead of night, there'll be no lights. It could be quite a scary experience, I would imagine. There is something coming in the opposite direction, but it's just another car. No spectral headless horses yet. Right, now we're going into really dark part of the lane. Everything is shrouded by the overhead trees, the big oak trees with their gnarled boughs are quite oppressive, the way they're pressing in. And now almost as if we're driving down a little tunnel. So if you can imagine, it's almost a car width lane with all the vegetation and foliage making an actual physical natural tunnel in the lane. Yeah, this would be quite scary in the dead of night. It has got a very eerie feeling to it. And I think we're just about, oh no, it keeps going on. We've just got onto a little bend and the lane goes on. So actually White Horse Lane does seem to be actually quite a long lane. So I don't know whether or not the headless horse actually gallops along the whole of the lane, or whether it's a particular spot on the lane where it is seen. It's a shame we didn't get to speak to any of the locals about it, but it's a fascinating tale and part of, obviously, Hertfordshire's myths, legends and folklore, and one I hope you've enjoyed hearing about. So I'm going to finish recording now and catch back up in the studio. So that was my trip to White Horse Lane. to see if we could see the supernatural headless spectral horse. And obviously, as we found out, the pub itself, it used to have a sign which, when I looked up on the internet, and the earliest sign I could find was, I'm guessing from the data on the picture, was around 2006.
Yeah.
That sign, I've got a picture of it here, because although I refer to it from when I went to make the visit, you haven't seen it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you can see this.
Oh, wow.
But we've got a white horse here. It looks like there's a figure riding in the back. Looks like a figure. Do you think he's in armour? I don't know.
Yeah, looks like he's charging into battle.
Yeah.
But
Is he holding a flag? Is that a flag?
It's difficult because the picture is as expanded as it can be.
Okay.
But can you see where the horse's head is? Do you
Yeah.
want to describe that for me?
A fountain of blood.
Fountain
It's
of
quite
blood.
dramatic.
Yeah, so you've got this fountain of blood gushing out.
Looks
It's
like a
very
Quentin Tarantino movie.
shot. Yeah.
Yeah, when I saw this picture, I was thinking of the slaughtered lamb from American
American
Werewolf
Werewolf
in
in
London.
London,
It's
yeah.
not the most welcoming sign.
No, but at the same time, isn't
It's
that
awesome.
Isn't that
It's
cool?
fantastic.
Yeah,
It
it's
is
cool.
the best
So
sign.
unique.
And it's exactly how you described that
Yeah.
kind of battle as well,
Yeah.
having the horse have his head cut off. And everything.
Obviously, that depiction on that sign, I don't know when it was painted, and if that is an armoured figure on the back, that would have nothing to do with the Saxons and the Vikings and Danelaw, because it's much later. But unfortunately, as in my visit there, that sign has long since departed, and it's a nice, pleasant horse's head, which is unusual
We
because
found the horse's head.
they show a picture on the side of the horse's head, but the actual whole legend and the fact that the pub takes its name from the legend,
Yeah.
it's called the White Horse Pub.
Maybe a horse's backside wouldn't have been as welcoming.
Well, it could. I mean, not being funny, I don't think it would have been particularly offensive to have a horse's torso on a sign without the head.
Just have it cut off where the sign ends. Just
Yeah,
have, like, the horse.
something like that.
Yeah.
So that it would be, well, that's unusual. You got a picture there of a pub sign, and it's a why have they
Where's
not
the
got
head?
that? Where's their gone?
Yeah, I wonder what happened to that sign.
Yeah, well, as I say, I went into the pub and I asked the barmaid. She had no idea about it, and unfortunately, again, as from my visit, there were no locals in there to ask about the sightings. But anyway, so I'm going to refer back to my research on it. So at the top of the lane, now we know that we have the White Horse Public House, which was opened in 1806. So compare that to the legend of the story. It's quite
A lot, yeah.
a reasonably recent pub, to be honest with you, 1806. But the pub was named after the legend of the spectral headless horse. So let's have a look. There are more details on the headless horse, which are newer. I say newer. They don't date back as far as the Danelaw. So there is a completely different version
Oh, okay.
Oh,
of where
okay.
the legend of the White Horse comes from. And it says that during the English Civil War, a farmer by the name of Pennyfather, not Pennywise,
Pennyworth.
or Pennyworth, no, a farmer called Pennyfather lived at Welsh's Farm and was a staunch royalist. And it is said that the Roundheads attacked his farm and decapitated the farmer, placing his head on a spike in the stable yard as a warning to all.
Blimey.
It's a bit rough.
Presumably not the farm.
You know, it's also been said that the spike still existed in the farmyard to 1981.
Blimey.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Presumably without the head.
Without the head, I assume.
Probably decayed us.
Yeah, well, that's kind of like really annoying because I would love to have seen that spike if that was a fabled spike. It may not have ever had anything to do with it. It could have just been a piece of
It's part of the story, isn't it?
a piece of iron or something sticking out the ground that might have been a piece of old farm machinery
Yeah,
or something.
yeah.
Yeah. But it was there till 1981. But then there's no reference to what happened to it or why.
You do wonder
somebody-
where all these things go, like the sign and everything. Like,
Yeah, well, I mean,
It's gotta go
yeah,
somewhere.
if you can
Room of requirement all of a sudden.
Yeah, the pub is over 200 years old, and you think if that got that, I mean, it is a cool sign.
yeah.
Super
You
cool.
know, you'd want to take that down. If you felt that it was maybe not so PC these
Nowadays.
days, which is a shame.
Replace the sign, remove the blood, and
I
put
was-
the original sign in the pub.
That's what I was
Yeah.
hoping. I was hoping that we'd go in the pub and they'd have the sign there.
On display.
On
like with a little
display.
plaque underneath.
Little plaque telling people because, you know, let's face it, generally in a pub, it's not a place where in England where you have loads of children going into the pub generally.
Yeah.
I mean, you have family pubs, yeah.
Because it was quite out of the way, wasn't it?
Yeah, you'd think that you could even have it in a, in the lounge bar or somewhere
Yeah.
tucked away, or even put down in the cellar.
Like, for instance, going back to American Werewolf in London, don't they have the pentagram
Yeah,
like
on the wall.
On the wall.
Yeah,
Just in that they don't really address it.
they don't address it.
The fact that it is so steeped in that is why the pub is called
Yeah,
the way it is.
The lane is there. First story dates back to the Danelaw, and then we move forward to the English Civil War, and then the pub is built, and it takes its name from the White Horse Lane.
Yeah.
So this spike that the farmer's head was on was there until 1981. So, I would love to know what happened to it, or why it was removed, who removed it. Or how do they know that it was removed in 1981?
Yeah. What was it before that?
Did somebody actually say, "Oh, by the way, we're removing the spike. Please make a note of the date"?
Can we take the skull off the top of it?
Anyway, Pennyfather's favourite white horse would not be led away quietly, and so it was also decapitated by the Roundheads.
Podcast took a doctor.
And now it's that spectral horse, which is believed to be Pennyfather's, which haunts White Horse Lane. It has been seen on several occasions and was described. And this was the thing. I was really hoping when I went to do that outside broadcast that I'd find somebody. Yeah, because a lot of the time, I've got to say, it was a midweek that I dropped in at the pub, and it's usually midweek that you find the locals.
Yeah.
Drop in and have a pint, and you'll find that one old man propping up the bar who knows all the tales of the village. Oh yeah, my grandfather, he rode that horse. But unfortunately, no, nothing. So I didn't actually get any actual eyewitness accounts. But the barmaid did refer to people telling the stories, and that people in the local area
It's still
have
around.
seen it.
It's still
That's
around.
good,
That's
yeah.
good.
But I have managed to find one report, and as I say, it's been seen on several occasions and was described by one witness from Tewin Orchard as being pure white and standing 15 hands high. This witness believes that she saw the horse early one evening in 1960.
Oh wow. Yeah.
At first she thought it was a living horse grazing in the orchard behind her cottage, but it later disappeared, but there was no other way it could have gotten out of the orchard if it was a living horse. And many locals have seen the headless horse, and people say that you cannot make any animal walk along the lane at night.
That'd be interesting to test.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I've also
Hopefully that's not your dog walk.
I've also had references that it's not just sightings of the spectral horse galloping up the lane, but it's also you can hear the hoof.
Ooh.
So you can hear its hoofs galloping. So you might not see the horse, but you can hear its hoofs galloping up the lane, and on the local byways as well. Sort of the walks that run along with the lane. So that's it. So we got this headless horse. I didn't get a headless horseman, but I got a headless horse. And while we were out, because you were with me, Zach.
I was.
Like you went off with Jack, you were being sound man. And we drove down the lane nice and slowly. And I've got to tell you, this lane is really quite oppressive. It's it's one car width. Did have some passing bays on it, but if you can imagine, listeners, if you can imagine in your mind's eye something out of Lord of the Rings, the trees in areas on this lane have grown up and then they've sort of circled over the top and intertwined over
Kind of
the
like
lane.
that bit where Frodo and all the hobbits would jump off the road and hide under the roots of a tree.
And you get what's that? Is it called the vertigo?
Vertigo
effect?
effect,
Yeah.
With the lens, and you got that kind of feeling from the lane that it was pressing in,
Continuous. You can't see an end to it.
And I was going down there, and we weren't seeing anything or anything like this. But now I kid you not, as Zach, you're my witness.
Yep.
Halfway down that lane, the windscreen on the inside started to steam up.
Ooh.
Started to steam up, and then, I don't know, quarter of a mile further on, completely cleared again. And I didn't put the fan on or anything like that.
Because it was quite a long road.
It's a long lane. If you ever go to White Horse Lane, it's a long lane, very bendy. But we were driving down there, and it's like the windscreen's steaming up, and then
Maybe you ran over the line.
but normally you'd expect it to steam up, and then you got to turn the
Open a window or something.
open the window, turn
Because
the
we
blowers on.
recorded that, didn't we?
Yeah, and so I don't know. Probably nothing, but
It's something, yeah.
it embellishes the story. Halfway down
adds to
that
the
lane,
atmosphere.
It's something because we can't really explain that as opposed to the lights with
Cyclists.
with the
cyclists.
cyclists.
Close
the
encounters style.
sudden mystery steaming up and then unsteaming without opening a window and without turning the fans on in the car.
Ooh. Did you hear any galloping?
No, I
Oh,
didn't
we
hear
were in
any.
the car,
We're
weren't
in
we?
the car.
Or just being around the area? Did you?
And I say we did have a walk around at the top of the lane and took a couple of photographs around the new pub sign. But yeah, no, absolutely fascinating. Again, I'd like to go back there. But as all tradition, was it?
Yeah, it's interesting that one.
Was it from a battle,
Yeah,
or was it Pennyfather's
yeah,
favourite white stallion?
that's interesting. That me and Zach's stories kind of have similar origins. That they kind of vary slightly, whereas that one has two very different.
Two very different.
Explanation.
One is a white horse in a battle,
Yeah,
and that can be heard or be seen, and obviously whoever painted that pub sign.
however old it is.
Yeah, I mean, the details on the photo suggested that it was 2006 when the photograph was taken. But however long that sign had been there, I don't know. But obviously somebody the person who'd painted that sign must have
Yeah,
been told all about this horse.
yeah.
Whoever it was that commissioned them to do that and put. I mean, not being funny, that was a lot of blood.
Yeah.
Yeah,
lot of red paint.
that was worthy of a Japanese samurai movie.
Yeah. Kill Bill.
You know, that was
Shogun
just
Assassin.
absolutely spurting out there. Yeah, so to paint that, obviously perfectly acceptable at the time, and unfortunately, shame it should still be perfectly acceptable today to have a sign like that.
If you're listening and you have any information about where this sign could
Yeah,
possibly
please,
be,
I'd love to know. Two things though. I'd love to know where the sign is.
Yeah,
Love to know if anybody listens to this podcast and they've actually witnessed seeing
yeah,
the headless white horse of White Horse Lane. I'd love to know about. We'd all love to know about that.
yeah.
And I want to know about this spike.
Yeah, this
Yes,
mysterious
yeah.
spike.
Yeah, because that was the
disappeared.
thing in the later story with the English Civil War, Roundheads and Cavaliers, and farmer Pennyfather getting his head chopped off, stuck on a spike. I mean, yeah, obviously there was the myth and legend around that metal spike.
Yeah.
For all those years,
Yeah.
since the English Civil War, this spike was meant to be there until 1981.
Yeah.
Why did it get taken away? And who did it?
Well, if you wouldn't have mentioned the dates and when it was removed, I wouldn't have thought much of it. But the fact that it was there for that long,
Yeah.
till
Yeah.
1981, it's got to have been preserved or whatever for a while.
Yeah, you'd think that it'd end up in a local museum. Or,
Yeah. How
or-
tall was it? Oh.
Well, exactly. You don't
This
know.
is all
If it's-
information we'd love to know.
If it was used as a kind of deterrent from locals, then obviously it's got to be quite.
But
profound.
also, it's interesting when you think about it. Although it's myths and legend, because this is supernatural, opposed to more maybe of a actual historical character. It's this white horse that is either seen or heard. But if it is the later story where the farmer gets his head chopped off, why do we not see the farmer in it? Why is it not like the headless farmer
Could it be the
on the
person who
headless
was
horse?
riding the horse?
Yeah.
Interesting point.
Could we make out a head on the person on the back?
Oh, I don't know. I can punch that up again, but that's an
C-
interesting.
CSI, the
I-
Simon.
Could it be the farmer?
Enhanced photo.
I didn't come across any reference to the farmer himself. Let's see if we can zoom in. It's very difficult, listeners, to see this.
Yeah, it's not the clearest of
it-
images.
We can see a flag, but there's not much other than.
Do you think that is depicting two arms
What's the-
outstretched?
What's at the bottom right there?
Is that the horse's head?
Yeah, it could be the
Could
horse
be.
head lying on the
Oh,
floor.
well, there's something behind him as well, isn't there?
Yeah.
But do you think that whoever's
Hang on, is
top
that
of the horse
is that red
looks like there's
there?
a bit
Does
of
that look
red.
like it's
That looks like someone's head.
someone's
could it be
head?
two heads? The farmer's head coming off and the horse's head coming off?
That could be.
That could be. That's such a shame we haven't got that. It could well be.
Is that the only picture that exists?
That is the
of
only picture I have come across of that sign. But if that's the case, then that would depict the English Civil War
Yeah.
Yeah.
story of the decapitated farmer actually riding
A
the
decapitated horse.
Yeah. From what I can see, it looks like he's wearing some kind of silver. He looks silver, doesn't it? It doesn't look
Well,
like he's.
it looks to me like it's armour. But
Yeah.
this definitely could be two arms outstretched and a head
The way I see it,
falling
yeah,
behind.
that's a head and that's a head.
Yeah, I think
So-
you're right. With gushing blood.
Yeah.
Lots of gushing blood. That is such an awesome sign.
There you go. The mystery deepens.
We have to
Yeah.
find out what happened to this sign
What
and
happened?
where it is now.
Yeah, what it actually depicts.
But that may be an interesting thing. Yeah, I'd love to find somebody that could tell us about why the farmer is not. I mean, obviously that sign. I think you're quite right, guys, that it depicts the farmer on the horse.
Yeah.
But all the tails of the horse just seem to be the horses.
Yeah.
But no, I haven't had any references to see anybody actually seeing the farmer
Yeah.
on the horse.
Or even the battle way back.
Yeah.
They didn't mention anything about who was riding it or
No.
what happened to them
I mean,
or anything.
normally I would imagine that if it was something that far back, that the white horse would probably be associated with a chieftain or something like that. Yeah, that
Interesting.
may be because you could imagine a white horse being exactly that. Yeah, a chieftain
More expensive.
riding
Yeah.
riding this white horse into
Yeah.
battle, and then if he gets killed, or the horse gets decapitated and the chieftain gets killed and the horse gallops away.
Maybe there's some unfinished business with the
Yeah.
horse.
Yeah, no, interesting. But anyway, so that's my
Yes.
slightly more supernatural tale
Yes.
of the
It's a bit darker.
the headless horse of Burnham Green. It's been a fascinating episode.
Yes.
Jack, you did
Jack O'Legs, the kind of
Robin Hood
Hood's
giant.
giant man.
And you did,
Sir Piers Shonks, the legendary dragon slayer.
and I did the Phantom White Horse
Yes.
of White Horse Lane.
Ooh.
I think the amount that we actually found during the research for this podcast, we could probably do another
Yeah.
a part 2 on just Hertfordshire.
Yes.
The crazy thing is that's just three.
Three.
Exactly.
stories.
Yeah, I found a lot more.
And there are just so many more.
Yeah.
I mean, hundreds, if not thousands of stories. Brilliant, absolutely fascinating story. We're going to have to come back. So, what are we doing, Jack? Are we going to be basically the three of us looking at further episodes down the line where we visit other shires?
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, we could also revisit Hertfordshire down the line.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
we could do all sorts. Okay, listeners, if you're out there and you're sitting there and you've got a fantastic story, maybe even a personal, eyewitness account of seeing a mythical creature or an apparition,
Some kind of bits of
or
folklore
you
from around
know
the
of
country.
some English hero that was out
or
there.
a mystery grave or something.
That's it.
Yeah.
Then get in touch with the comments down. Maybe we can come out and do an interview, do a broadcast, and that'd be absolutely brilliant.
Do an
wouldn't it?
episode on it.
Yeah, do an episode on it. Yeah, we'd be well up for that.
Yes.
And that leaves us with one thing to round the show off, doesn't it?
Yes. Do you know what time it is?
What time is it?
What time is it, Jack?
It's time for Let's Get Quizzical.
Let's get quizzical with folklore.
Let's get quizzical. Don't lose your head.
Let me hear your
Quizzical.
decapitated horse talk.
Let me see your Jack O'Legs.
Shonk. that's all I can say.
Right, it's quizzical time.
5 questions.
Get your thinking head on.
5 questions. Do you want
Is it still
to
attached?
work as a team or do you want to...
Oh, we work as a team.
We work as a
Works
team.
You're the questions master.
Well, I don't mind. Okay, 5
After
questions.
my complete fail the other week of planting my flag on Mars. Yeah.
Go listen to that episode if you
I
haven't.
need to pull it back. Come on.
So 5 questions. I'd
5.
say if you get 4 of them right, you win a prize of... I don't
yeah,
have
what's
one.
the prize?
You don't have a prize.
Oh, no.
It's pride.
Okay.
Okay, question 1.
Question 1.
The Banshee comes from Irish mythology. Her shriek foretells which of these events in a family?
Okay.
A birth, B, a death, or C, a wedding?
Banshee. Death.
Death.
Correct.
Yay!
Yes.
The Banshee comes from Celtic myth, and there are similar stories of spirits who foretell death in both Scottish and Welsh mythology, which share Ireland's Celtic history. The wail of a Banshee would be a frightening thing to hear, as it meant someone close to you was going to reach the end of their life. Question 2. In English legend, Lady Godiva is connected to which city in England? A. Coventry, B. London, C. Liverpool, or D. Bristol?
Coventry.
I don't know. I don't know this one at all.
Correct.
Yes.
Coventry.
Interesting fact. Little factoid.
Ooh.
My wife, Tina,
Yep.
her great grandmother was a hair model for a company back in the late 1800s, and she had hair that was so long. It's got a picture, a black and white picture of her hair being held out along the double wing biplanes. Her hair was as long as a wing of a plane,
Wow.
and we have We don't know who the artist was, but we have a painting in our lounge of her on a white horse as Lady Godiva, but her hair obviously covers up all the covers her modesty.
Yes.
And I believe the company that she was a hair model for, which was a company that did Hair Restorer, hence the long hair, their motif, their logo was a white horse.
Oh.
So you got this.
Did it have a head?
Yes, it actually did have a head. But she's there, and she's Lady Godiva.
Oh, okay.
There you go, family connection to Lady Godiva.
So for those who don't know, the legend of Lady Godiva tells the story of a noblewoman who rode naked through the streets of Coventry to protest about the high taxes imposed by her husband. He had agreed to reduce them if she carried out the plan. Before she did so, all the people of Coventry were ordered to stay indoors and not look. One man disobeyed the order, and his name has passed into folklore as Peeping Tom, meaning someone who spies on people without their knowledge.
That's where we get the term in England of you're a peeping Tom.
This episode's really
You're
full of
learning
facts.
so much.
Yeah, awesome.
Question 3. Jack O'Kent
Oh,
is remembered for outwitting the devil. Which crop did he hand over to keep his part of the bargain?
hang on.
A. Swede, B. Turnips, C. Radishes, or D. Carrots?
Ooh.
Can we have the vegetable list again?
A. Swede, B. Turnips, C. Radishes, or D. Carrots?
I'm going to go with radish.
You're going for radish. All right. Do you know?
Because I'm not really sure about
I can't
this
see.
one.
I don't know. I just don't think radishes would be a crop. Radish crop? I don't know. Radishes are only. I would have said turnips as a crop. I'm going turnips.
Turnip smugglers.
Turnip smugglers. I've had a lot of trouble over the years with turnip smugglers.
Are you locking that in?
Yep.
Correct.
Yay! Sorry.
Surprisingly, Jack O'Kent is not a myth associated with Kent at all, but with Herefordshire and the Welsh marshes. He is adept at making deals with the devil and managing to win the better side of the bargain. The story of the turnip crop arises as the devil chose the top half of the crop, expecting a harvest of wheat, but receiving only the leaves of the turnips, while Jack retained the edible roots. Various geographical locations, such as Trellick and the Skirrid, are associated with Jack O'Kent, and so is the village of Kentchurch in Herefordshire, which is the likely source of the name.
Out of interest, since you had obviously Jack O'Legs, and
Yeah.
this is
Jack O'Kent.
right, so it's Jack of, so it would be Jack of Legs and Jack of.
Wait a
Kent.
second. Wait, your name's Jack as well.
And he outwitted the devil, which is what happens in your
Yeah,
story.
it happens in my story.
Well, there's a lot going on here.
So many connections,
The
crossovers.
white horse with the
Yeah,
previous
yeah,
answer.
Yeah.
one.
yeah. Wow.
It's getting
So
spooky.
we got 3 for 3 at the minute, haven't we?
Yeah, this is getting spooky now, guys.
Oh. Okay. We haven't got a farmer in there. Well, that was a farmer.
I know a farmer.
Yeah. Yeah. You
Ah!
right.
Question 4. The creatures of myth which can transform from seals to humans are known by which name?
Seals.
Seals to
A. A Shedim, B. A Siddi, C. A Sylvan, or D. A Selkie?
Selkie.
I thought I was going to say like a siren or something. But,
Selkie.
Selkie, you seem pretty
Yeah.
confident
I'm
on
pretty
that.
confident on that one.
Correct, Selkie.
Oh,
Yes.
blimey.
The Selkie legend originates in the islands of Orkney and Shetland, where the local name for a seal is Selkie. The creatures can change from seal to human and then back to their original form by casting off their skins and then replacing them. In human form, the Selkies are particularly beautiful and are known for seducing the real men and women with whom they come into contact, although the Selkie will always return to the sea.
Oh, yeah, see. 4 for 4.
Question 5. Can you make it?
See, it's
100%.
good having the old man in there.
Yeah.
Final question. In Scottish folklore,
Oh,
the Wolva is equivalent to which mythical creature?
the wolver.
I've never
A.
heard of the wolver.
Griffin, B. Werewolf, C. Vampire, or D. Phoenix?
Wolver.
Wolver.
Wolf.
Yeah, but that might be too obvious. Can we have the list again?
A. Griffin, B. Werewolf, C. Vampire, or D. Phoenix? So spelt W-U-L-V-E-R.
Wolf.
It's got to be a werewolf.
Wolf.
It's got to be a werewolf.
Yeah, I'm thinking by how
It
it's
sounds.
spelled.
It sounds
Wolf.
the way it's
Wolf.
spelt. It sounds almost
Beowulf. Wolf.
Scandinavian.
Yeah.
And then he's going to say something else. He's gonna
Okay, we're going to go for werewolf.
Yeah.
Correct.
Oh,
Yay! Thank goodness. 5 for 5.
blimey. Thank you.
I thought it was going to be one of them ones where he gone
Trick
for the
question.
obvious. For the obvious.
The Legend of the Volva?
It's taking a dark turn now.
Legend of the Wolver, or Galley Trot, is associated with the Shetland Isles. The Wolver is described as having the head of a wolf with sharp teeth and a body covered with hair. I have to read it again. The Wolver is aggressive unless attacked. And is even known to leave. Oh, no.
It's all gone wrong.
Has even been known to leave fish that he has caught.
Oh, guys, put it together.
And has even been known to leave fish that he caught for families who would otherwise not have them.
So he's kind of like a Robin Hood
Robin
of
Hood of Wales.
Yeah,
That's
that's the end of the quiz. You got 100%.
Yay! Well, that was a fantastic, fascinating trip into local folklore.
Yeah, so we learn a bit more as well towards the end there about.
Yeah. Are we going to revisit this then?
Yeah,
Yes,
I think so.
definitely.
Again, ladies and gentlemen out there, please comment. If you've got a story that we could actually go and do an outside broadcast on, it'd be fantastic. Pop it in the comments.
Give us a chance to visit the tomb of Piers as well,
Yes.
Yes, that would.
and maybe see if we can catch the headless horse as well. Shonk.
And to round off this episode, we're going to revisit a segment known as the Now We Know Flashback.
Yay.
So
Yay.
with this, we're going to be revisiting a previous podcast that we got some replies to, and that is the tasting beer episode.
Ooh, one of my favourites.
That was a good.
From what I can remember, it's one of my favourites.
That will go down in history.
I can't remember that episode. So a comment was made by Chaz Albrighton, and he said, "This made me sad, as unless it is gluten-free, I can't drink beer anymore."
Oh, right. So he's gluten intolerant.
Yes. And we replied, "Well, if we can find some, perhaps you would like to come into the studio for a recording session." He then replied, "Of course, or cider, or whiskey, or rum, lol."
He's enthusiastic.
"It would be a pleasure." We then replied, "Chaz Albrighton, fantastic, we'll get in contact and set it up." And then Chaz said, "Look forward to it."
Right.
So there we are.
There we go.
Chaz Albrighton has been invited into the studio for a cider, whiskey, or rum episode.
I do believe cider is gluten free.
There you are then.
So,
I do like whiskey.
So,
Rum,
Chaz,
rum's cool.
Not
I
a
like
lot
rum.
of rum, but
Chaz, if you're out there, I think we're going to be getting you in for a cider tasting session.
and we know someone that actually makes their own cider as well, don't
Yes. Well, I used to. But
we? We can make our own.
we can make our own.
There you go.
Oh, all right there, boy. You want to have some of my cider?
That's Chris Austin Wall, isn't
Yeah,
it?
Chris
Yeah.
Austin will.
Oh,
I don't think we'll all be able to fit in here, my lovely.
We could bottle our own Now We Know show.
Well,
cider.
that's going to have to be multiple episodes.
Yes.
Okay.
The Now We Know show cider.
Tasting sessions.
God save our livers.
We could have a headless horse as the motif.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll
Don't lose your head.
have Jack O'Legs riding it. With
Or shooting his
Fighting a
bow.
dragon.
As a dragon. As a dragon.
Yeah.
That's it. I'll swig in a bottle of our very special Now We Know show cider. Cider.
he's just snacking on some Japanese snacks. while he's-
Snacks.
Blimey, let's not get too overcomplicated.
Okay.
Okay, so that was the Now We Know show flashback.
He's got
Brilliant.
tinfoil hat.
Oh, yeah. While riding on a flat earth. Anyway.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please like and subscribe to this channel and comment below any suggestions of topics or activities you'd like to listen to in future episodes.
That's a big goodbye from Buzz.
Goodbye from Jack.
And goodbye from Zach.
Bye.
Bye.
Now we know.
Now we know show with dragons, giants, and headless horses.